So even before I went to kindergarten, I wanted to be a boy. I grew up in a very dysfunctional family, and I didn't know it at the time, but the lies that I took as my belief system was about to shape my life. I watched my dad, who was emotionally and verbally abusive to my mom, and I watched my mom crumble underneath the weight of that. My dad showed me that women are weak, women are vulnerable, and women are hated. And as I watched my mom crumble underneath this, she exhibited that. Women are weak, women are hated, and they're vulnerable. Now, with my mom supposedly being my role model, I would look at that and I would be like, she's a woman, I'm a girl. But if I'm to be a man, what is that going to look like? So I made a vow. I'm going to be the man my dad is not. So as I continued to grow, when I was 10, between the ages of 10 and 12, I was molested and sexually abused by a family member. Also about that time, there was a neighbor boy that I became friends with. His name is Phil. And eventually I told him, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to become a man. And he said to me, that's awesome. Okay, what did he know? He was 10. But that was the affirmation I needed to know that the road I was choosing was the right one. So I continued to grow, still having that longing to want to grow up and be a man, to change over. So at the age of 16, I got a car and I began to act out. I began to date younger girls that actually went to my friend's Phil's school because they were 2 years younger than me and we would never go to the same school. After that, that only increased that hunger to want to be a man. So at the age of 19, changed my name and started taking hormone shots. I thought I was free. It was euphoric. I have arrived. I am now finally living as who I should have been all along. I had moved in with a family, and she had daughters, and they kept begging me to go to church with them. Now, I was raised Lutheran, and so for me, I didn't have a relationship with God. I only knew about God, so I would say I was a God stalker, because stalkers only know about their victims. They don't know them, right? So I only knew about God. I didn't know him. So I went to church because they were begging me and begging me and begging. They were so relentless. I was like, fine. So I went, and they talked about Jesus. Now, I hadn't really heard or learned much about Jesus. So I thought, okay, well, he sounds like he's pretty cool, so let me learn about him. So eventually, he began to win my heart over, and so one Sunday night, I came down and I accepted the Lord as my Savior. Got up the next morning, and nothing had changed. Didn't hear the Lord say, the way you're living is bad. I don't like it. You need to change back. Didn't hear that. So the next Sunday, I thought, well, maybe it didn't take because nothing had changed in me. So I took the altar call again. Got up the next morning, nothing changed. Third week, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this again. So I came down, and the pastor's like, so, the first time you take the altar call usually takes, you're good, you're saved. I'm like, all right. So the next morning, I got up, still the same feeling, no change. The Lord didn't say anything to me about it. So I'm like, he must be good. Now, he didn't affirm it either, okay? But because of his lack of response, I thought I was on the right path. So I had gotten this job and began working as a man, and my dad had found out where I was working. So, bless his heart, he went and he told my boss. He found my boss and he said, the man who's working for you is really not a man, that's my daughter. Well, it just so happened that a woman that I went to church with heard this conversation, and she told the pastors. And the pastors pulled me into the office and they said, hey, we heard a rumor about you and we just want to know, who are you? Who are you really? So I said to them, I'm a man who used to be a woman. Not the truth, but that's what I told them. And they said, wow, we love you, but we don't want you going to church here. So I thought, well, that's fine. I left. But somehow in my heart, I knew that was not the heart of the Lord. That was the heart of man. So I started a new job, and I met a girl who was a Christian. And we started to date, and she took me to her church, and I loved her church. And I was like, this is really great. And I can remember going over to her house and she'd be reading her Bible, and I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, reading my Bible. That's what Christians do. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. So guess who started reading their Bible? So after probably about 3 years, we broke up, and I jumped right into another relationship. It was a rebound relationship. And after dating this woman for about a year, I woke up one morning and I was like, oh my gosh, she's my mom and I'm my dad. Everything I had hated, I had become. So I broke up with her, and I continued on in this church, and I jumped more and more into the church. And I had joined the orchestra. I played the French horn. I'm like, they need a French horn. Let's do this. So one night on my way to orchestra practice, the Lord spoke to me, and he said, will you now? Will you now? And I'm like, took this inventory, had nothing to lose, nothing in the way, and I'm like, yes, Lord, I will. Continued on to orchestra practice. Things were the same. It was great. I still thought he was okay with my lifestyle. But I didn't know when I said yes to the Lord. Prior to that, in the previous relationship where I was my dad and she was my mom, I had fallen heavy into pornography. Heavy. And when I said yes to the Lord, it took me 3 months to realize this, I'm a little slow. He had delivered me from that addiction. So in the next 4 years after saying yes to the Lord, there was this insatiable hunger within me, and I couldn't get enough of the Lord. I sought him everywhere, made room for him everywhere in my life. And the church I was going to began to recognize this. Hey, we have a potential leader here. So next thing I know, I'm playing in the orchestra. I'm involved in the junior high. I love junior high kids. And I'm leading a men's small group, Bible study. I'm involved in the young adults. I'm involved in the older single adults. I was involved everywhere. Well, one night coming home from the junior high retreat, I went to night church, and the Lord had given me spiritual parents. And my spiritual dad came up to me, and he's like, can I talk to you? And I'm like, oh yeah, I think I know what this can I talk to you thing is. And sure enough, I go back there, and he and this pastor was sitting there, and I was like, yeah, I'm about to be confronted. And so Dave said to me, the pastor, hey, we're hearing rumors about you, and I just want to know, who are you? Who are you really? Same question. Only this time I said, I'm a woman living as a man. And when I did, the Holy Spirit blew into me. And I knew I had to go back to being the woman that God had created me to be. And I also saw the next 2 weeks of my life going to each pastor, this is the deal, I'm a woman, I need to step down, and all of that. So Dave said, you know what? I asked Dave, so Dave, what do I do? And he's like, well, you should, you could, there's, probably, yeah, I don't know. So I said, well, let me tell you what I saw. And he's like, okay. So I told him, and he's like, wow, okay, you know what? So let's meet tomorrow and let's start this. I'll walk with you. Wait, what? He's like, yeah, I'll walk with you. So he did. So eventually I got involved with the Portland Fellowship to start this walk out. And I moved back. At that time I was living in Vancouver, and I moved back. And I got involved in the Portland Fellowship. And after 3 years of my own healing, I became a small group leader. And then after about 6 years of that, I was able to cross fully over into living as a woman, change my name back and all of that stuff. And after that 6 years, I realized I need to step away from the Portland Fellowship because I need to be known for the woman that God really created me to be, and not, aren't you the guy, or aren't you the person that lived as a man? I just needed to step away. So I did that for about 4 years. But, Portland Fellowship never left my heart. Pretty soon there was this tug on me. So I went back to Portland Fellowship kind of under the wire because I felt inadequate to be ministering because I hadn't been doing that for a while. So I came in as prayer, as a prayer team. And after a year of that, the Lord's like, hey, why don't you become a small group leader? I'm like, oh no, not doing that. So that night I had a dream, and it was kind of troubling to me. So I called a friend and I'm like, hey, I had this dream. What do you think it is? She's like, I think the Lord's calling you back to being a small group leader. So I came back to being a small group leader, and after being a year as being a small group leader, Jason approached me, our executive director, and he's like, hey, what do you think about teaching? So inside, I'm having this conversation with the Lord, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. And the Lord's like, yeah, tell him yeah. And I'm like, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes. Yes, Jason, that would be great. I would do that. I said, well, what do you want me to teach on? He goes, femininity. Again, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Yes, Jason, that would be great. I would love to do that. On the drive home, I'm like, are you kidding me, Lord? Do you not know where I've lived? Do you not know any? Do you remember that? Hello? And I said, okay, look, you're going to have to get me out of this. And then I realized what a slap in the enemy's face. The very thing that he meant to kill, destroy, and steal has been redeemed, and now I get to teach on that. So moving forward, continuing to be involved in the Portland Fellowship, and eventually I become part of the board, and then eventually chair of the board. And then just last year, I stepped up and took over the job of the women's ministry leader. And one time, as I was sharing, or I was preparing to teach, I realized how incredibly free I am. But yet, I didn't know when that happened. So I asked the Lord, Lord, I'm free. I mean, I don't want to date women. I'm not interested in it. I can admire them for their beauty. I definitely don't want to be a man again. But Lord, when did that happen? Lord, when did that happen? And he did this. I saw this. I was pondering my question. And then he says, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, how do you not know? Because you were there. You walked with me. I know you saw me. You were there. How do you not know? And he said, I never saw you that way. I was undone. Because I realized he only ever saw me as his daughter and through his intentions and the plans that he had for my life. So I want to leave you with this last truth. I am just not the man I used to be.